Okay, so are you ready for this?
Yeah, hit me.
We're diving into this book, The Paperclip MIndset. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, actually, it's by Frank Karsten, right? An IT guy.
That's the one.
Yeah.
But he's not your typical techie, you know.
Right. I read that he's written about, like, societal and political stuff, too.
Exactly. Which makes this book even more interesting, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Like, what does an IT guy know about, keeping things simple?
Well, that's the whole point, right? He's been in the thick of it. Startups, these massive IT projects.
The ones that make you scratch your head and wonder, how do they even get to this point?
Exactly. And get this, he actually argues that IT projects can be even more complex than, say, building a bridge.
Really? That's a bold statement. I mean, bridges are pretty complex.
I know. I thought the same thing. But his point is that with a bridge, you can see the complexity.
You see the physical structure, the materials, the workers.
Right. But software, it's all invisible. It's happening in this digital world. Easy to get carried away.
And lose track of just how complicated it's becoming.
Until it's too late, and the budget's blown up and deadlines are missed.
So how does he propose to fix this?
Well, the book is all about this idea of radical simplicity. It's about doing less.
To achieve more.
Exactly. So it sounds kind of counterintuitive, right?
It does. Like, how can you do less and get more done?
That's what we thought. So Karsten starts by introducing this idea of the complexity monster.
The complexity monster. Okay, that sounds interesting.
Right. It's this metaphor for how our brains naturally want to add more and more to projects.
More features, more safety measures, more everything.
Yeah, all in the name of completeness, quality, you name it. But it ends up backfiring.
Creates this kind of chain reaction.
He calls it the chain reaction of negatives. Like you add one element and it triggers all these other needs.
Oh, I see. So give me an example.
Sure. Like you bring on a new team member. Sounds simple enough, right?
Yeah.
Suddenly you need more office space, more equipment, maybe even a new HR manager.
Right. The costs start adding up. The communication gets more difficult.
And then there's Hofstadter's law, which basically says that things always take longer than you think they will.
Oh, tell me about it. Every project I've ever worked on.
Right. And even when you try to factor in potential delays, you're still underestimating.
It's like time has a way of slipping through your fingers no matter how hard you try to hold on to it.
He has this chart in the book. It's kind of hilarious, but also terrifying.
Yeah.
It shows how project timelines just keep expanding.
Even with the most pessimistic estimates.
Exactly. So we have to be realistic. Build in some buffer.
A Hofstadter buffer, you mean? I like that.
Right. If we think it'll take 2 weeks, schedule 3. Better to underpromise and overdeliver.
Definitely. So we've got this complexity monster and Hofstadter's law working against us. What else?
Well, then he brings in the second law of thermodynamics, entropy and all that.
Hold on. Isn't that a physics thing? What does that have to do with IT projects?
Well, the law basically states that everything in the universe tends toward disorder, right?
Yeah.
Chaos. Things fall apart.
Exactly. And Karsten connects this to projects, arguing that they naturally drift toward chaos and complexity.
It's like that junk drawer in my kitchen. No matter how many times I organize it, it always ends up a mess.
Right. Like the universe is conspiring against us. So what do?
Surrender to the chaos.
No. This is where the paperclip mindset comes in. It's all about stripping away the non-essentials.
Getting down to the bare bones of what really matters.
Exactly. And he has 3 key principles for this mindset.
Lay them on me. I'm intrigued.
First, you have to truly understand the danger of the complexity trap, like really get it.
Okay, so awareness is key. Got it. What's next?
Second, you need to create a system that actually rewards simplicity.
Interesting. So it's not just about individual effort. It's about setting up the right incentives.
Exactly. And then, maybe the most important point, you have to master the art of deciding what not to do.
I feel like that's a skill that's rarely taught, but it's so crucial. Right. And he has this great quote from Michael Porter. The essence of strategy is choosing what not to do.
Love that. It's so easy to get caught up in doing everything, but sometimes saying no is the most strategic move you can make.
Exactly. And, he really emphasizes that this is a skill you develop over time.
It's not like you wake up one morning and suddenly you're a simplicity guru.
Right. It's a constant process of being aware of those complexity traps and choosing to fight against them.
So he's saying it's more of a mindset shift than a set of hard and fast rules.
Exactly. And he talks about how, for him, it's led to, lower project costs.
Faster delivery, better results.
Yeah, and even more enjoyment at work. Who wouldn't want that?
Sign me up. So how do we actually put this mindset into action? What are the practical steps?
Well, he lays out these 4 core objectives. He calls them the 4 T's.
The 4 T's. Okay, I'm all ears. Hit me with it. What's the first T?
The first one is minimize time.
Minimize time. Makes sense. I mean, time is money, right?
Exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting. He's all about being decisive, setting tight deadlines.
Avoiding analysis paralysis, that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one. Getting stuck in the weeds, overthinking everything.
And then there's the student syndrome, right? Procrastinating until the last minute because the deadline is motivating.
Right. But that can lead to all sorts of problems in a project context. Rushing, cutting corners.
And he's even a fan of setting really short deadlines, like artificially short.
Yeah, like creating a sense of urgency by pretending the project is due sooner than it actually is.
I mean, it sounds a little crazy, but I can see how it might work. Kind of like tricking your brain into being more productive.
Right. And then the second T is minimize target.
Minimize target. Okay, I'm curious. What does that mean exactly?
It's all about staying focused on the essentials. Identifying that minimal viable product, the MVP.
The bare minimum you need to launch.
Exactly. And then there's the you ain't gonna need it principle, or yakien. Catchy. I like it. So resist the urge to add all the bells and whistles that might be cool, but not essential.
Exactly. Be ruthless with your priorities. Laser focused on the core goals.
Sounds like a recipe for staying on track and avoiding scope creep. I like it. What's next?
Okay, the third T is minimize team. And this one really resonated with me.
Minimize team. So smaller is better. I mean, sometimes you need a lot of people to get things done.
Well, Karsten is really advocating for these small, tight-knit teams. And he's a big proponent of in-person collaboration.
Interesting. Especially in the early stages of a project, I imagine.
Exactly. He acknowledges that remote work has its perks, but he believes it can lead to communication breakdowns.
Yeah, I can see that. You miss those spontaneous interactions, the brainstorming sessions, that kind of thing.
Right. He actually has this table in the book comparing the pros and cons of in-person versus remote work.
And I bet he leans heavily toward in-person.
He does. He really emphasizes those intangible benefits of being in the same room. Yeah. Building social credit, those water cooler moments. And to really stir things up, he even brings up Elon Musk's stance on in-person work at Tesla.
I know, right? Talk about adding fuel to the fire.
Musk is pretty adamant about people being physically present. I think that's going to spark some debate, for sure.
Oh, yeah. Especially with so many companies embracing remote work these days.
It's definitely going to make people think about the trade-offs, like, are those intangible benefits of in-person work worth giving up the flexibility of remote?
It's a tough one.
Yeah.
But it's a conversation worth having for sure.
Absolutely. So we've covered minimizing time, target, and team. What's the final T?
The final one, and this might seem a little counterintuitive for an IT guy, is minimize technology.
Minimize technology. Now that's a curveball. Right. I mean, isn't technology supposed to make our lives easier?
You'd think so, right?
Yeah.
But his point is that we often overcomplicate things by using trendy frameworks or tools that we don't fully understand.
Oh, I see. So it's about using the right tool for the job, not just the newest or shiniest thing.
Exactly. He's a big advocate for sticking with standard tools that you know like the back of your hand.
Yeah.
And avoiding getting caught in plug-in hell and all that.
Plug-in hell, that's a good one. I've definitely been there. Too many plugins, too many dependencies, and suddenly your project is a tangled mess.
He makes the case that sometimes a manual solution, even if it feels less elegant, can actually be faster and more effective than trying to automate everything.
It's like sometimes the simplest solution is the best, even if it doesn't win any awards for technical sophistication.
Right. It's about choosing the tool that gets the job done, not the one that looks the most impressive on your resume.
It's like that saying, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Oh, for sure. Sometimes we get so attached to our favorite tools
that we try to force them to solve every problem.
Even when a simpler approach would be way better.
Right. So we've got these 4 T's for minimizing things, but what about the human factor?
Well, that's a big part of the book, too. Karsten actually dives into why engineers might be especially prone to overcomplicating things.
That's interesting. I mean, engineers are supposed to be problem solvers, right?
You'd think so. But he talks about how in some tech environments, complexity can actually be rewarded.
Wait, really? How so?
Well, it can create this sense of job security. Like if you're the only one who understands this super complex system,
you become indispensable.
Exactly. And it can also boost your status among colleagues.
Oh, I see. Like, look at me. I built this incredibly intricate thing. I must be a genius.
Exactly. It could even make your resume look more impressive.
Right. Proficient in 17 different programming languages and 42 obscure frameworks. But that kind of thinking can be a real trap.
It can. Because you're optimizing for individual gain instead of what's best for the team and the product.
It's like building a Rube Goldberg machine just to turn on a light switch. It might be technically impressive.
But is it really the most efficient or effective way to do it?
Definitely not. And he actually quotes Elon Musk here, which I thought was brilliant.
What did Musk say?
He said, "One of the biggest mistakes smart engineers make is optimizing a thing that shouldn't exist."
Ooh, that's good. That's really good.
It's so easy to get caught up in the technical details, you know. We lose sight of the bigger picture.
Like, are we even solving the right problem? Or are we just creating a really elegant solution to a problem that doesn't even matter?
Exactly. It's like polishing the brass on the Titanic. Sure, it looks nice, but it's not going to save the ship.
Okay, so another point he tackles is this resistance to the idea of good enough. We're always taught to strive for perfection.
Yeah, that's the message we get from school, from our parents, from society. But in the real world, perfection can be a real roadblock.
He actually reframes good enough as being strategic, not lazy.
I like that. It's about recognizing that perfection is often a moving target, and chasing it can really slow you down.
He uses this great analogy of a ladder. Like if you're trying to climb a tall ladder,
And you try to jump straight to the top.
you're probably going to fall flat on your face.
Ouch.
Right. But if you take it one rung at a time,
Focusing on making each step good enough,
you'll eventually reach the top. It's about making progress incrementally.
and recognizing that sometimes the fastest way to get to a great solution is to start with a good enough version.
And then iterate from there, improve it over time.
So it's not about settling for mediocrity,
It's about recognizing that done is better than perfect.
especially in the early stages of a project. Get something out there, get feedback, and then make it better.
Exactly. And you know what really brings all this to life? Are the case studies he shares in the book.
Oh yeah, the case studies. That's where the rubber meets the road. He gives all these real-world examples of how he applied the paperclip mindset to, solve problems.
And often saved a ton of time, money, and effort in the process.
Like the time he chose to handle payment processing manually for a startup.
Instead of investing in some complex automated system right away.
Right. It saved them time and resources in those crucial early stages.
Allowed them to focus on other, more important aspects of the business.
And there's the story about how he manually created a Google map of store locations.
Instead of building an automated data feed.
A simple, pragmatic solution that got the job done.
Without all the technical overhead. He even talks about IBM using something called prototyping to test speech-to-text software without actually building it.
Wait, what? How did they do that?
They basically had a person hiding behind the scenes typing out what the test subjects were saying.
It's like a Wizard of Oz approach to product development. I love it.
Right. It's genius. They were able to validate the concept and gather valuable feedback.
Before investing tons of resources into building the actual technology.
And he also dives into the dangers of what he calls layer love.
Layer love. What's that?
This is where engineers get a little too excited about adding layers upon layers of complexity to a system.
Oh, I've seen that happen. It's like they're building a software parfait.
A parfait of complexity. He tells this story about inheriting a system that had 9 layers.
9 layers. Oh my God. That's a recipe for disaster.
It was a nightmare to work with and debug. So it's a cautionary tale about over-engineering.
Sometimes the simplest solution is the best, even if it doesn't feel as impressive.
And in another case, he was able to give a customer access to the data they needed by using a simple SQL VW.
Instead of building a complex API.
Again, finding that pragmatic solution that delivers value.
Without getting lost in the technical weeds.
And remember that story about the slow product search function in that Magento web shop?
Yeah, what about it?
To test if it was even feasible to speed it up, he built this bare bones proof of concept.
Stripping away all the unnecessary complexity.
No real data. No fancy user interface. And to his surprise, it turned out the search function could run super fast, even on cheap shared hosting.
That's amazing.
It is. It's a good reminder that we can gain valuable insights by simplifying things, cut out all the noise and focus on the essence.
And he also talks about his experiences working with this remote development team in Italy.
Highlighting the challenges of communication and coordination across time zones.
Especially when you're trying to build something quickly and efficiently.
Right. And again, he stresses the importance of those spontaneous interactions, those water cooler moments.
But you just don't get when everyone is working remotely.
And, of course, he brings up Elon Musk again, who famously said, "I am a big believer that people are more productive when they are in person."
Clearly, Karsten shares that belief.
He does. And then there's this case study about a startup that was obsessed with scalability way too early.
Like they were trying to solve for 1 million users before they even had 1,000.
Exactly. And they chose this really complex and expensive hosting solution before they needed it.
Like Amazon Web Services or something.
Exactly. And Karsten argues they should have started with a simpler solution and focused on achieving early success.
Before worrying about handling massive scale, don't create problems you don't have yet.
Exactly. Focus on the immediate challenges, and then you can deal with the bigger ones as they come up.
And sometimes they never even materialize.
Right. And then there's this story about a database problem where the proposed solution was to basically rip and replace the entire system.
Go from MySQL to Elasticsearch.
Yeah, with the hope that it would speed things up.
But it turned out this flight forward actually made things worse.
It did. The new system was slower, and it introduced a whole new set of complexities.
So it's a reminder that sometimes the simplest solution, like optimizing the existing system or upgrading the hardware,
Can be the most effective. Resist that urge to jump to the newest, shiniest technology without first exploring the simpler options.
it's like that saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Sometimes we get so caught up in the allure of the new that we forget about the value of what we already have.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. What are your thoughts so far? Are you starting to see how this paperclip mindset could apply to your own work?
Definitely. I mean, I've definitely fallen into some of these complexity traps myself.
Me too.
I think what's so brilliant about this book is that it's not just about IT, you know? It's a way of thinking that can apply to any field where complexity is running rampant.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, he even talks about applying this mindset to your personal life.
Like decluttering your home, simplifying your routines.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that complexity is often just a form of waste.
Wasted time, wasted energy, wasted resources.
And challenging that assumption that more is always better.
Sometimes less is truly more.
And to reinforce this idea, he really emphasizes the importance of pushing back, you know?
Pushing back, like saying no to things.
Exactly. We shouldn't just blindly accept every request or demand that comes our way.
Whether it's from a client, a boss, or even ourselves.
It's like we get so programmed to say yes.
That we forget we even have the option to say no.
Right. And Karsten actually gives us some really great tools for pushing back effectively.
Like what?
He has these 2 key questions that we should ask whenever we get a new request, a new feature request, whatever.
Oh, I like this. Give me those questions.
Okay, the first one is, what is the exact problem you're trying to solve?
It seems so simple, but you'd be surprised how often we jump to solutions without really understanding the problem.
It's like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound.
You're treating the symptom, not the cause.
Exactly. And then the second question is, how often would this solution be used?
Oh, that's good. So it forces you to think about the value of the solution, right?
Yeah, is it worth the time, the effort, the resources? Or are we over-engineering something that will barely get used?
I love those questions. They're so simple, but they can really cut through the noise and get to the heart of the matter.
And I bet even clients would appreciate that kind of thoughtfulness, It shows you're really trying to understand their needs.
Yeah, it shows you're not just a yes man, you're a partner. You're actually thinking critically about their request.
So how do we put this paperclip mindset into practice? Well, he gives this really handy simplification technique.
Oh, yeah.
He calls it the 3 questions approach.
The 3 questions. All right, lay them on me.
Okay, question number 1. Do we really need it?
The Yagini principle in action.
Exactly. Question number 2. Do we really need it now?
Prioritization. Love it.
And then question number 3. Do we really need it now and like this?
So it's not just about whether we need it. It's about whether we need it in this specific form at this specific time.
Exactly. It encourages us to think outside the box, to consider alternative solutions.
That might be simpler, more effective.
Right. I just love this framework. It's so easy to remember and apply to almost any situation.
It's like a mental checklist for cutting through the complexity.
And, as we've been talking about all this, I've been thinking about how we often equate complexity with intelligence.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like the more complex something is, the smarter it must be.
But Karsten is really challenging that assumption.
He's saying that true intelligence lies in the ability to simplify.
To distill things down to their essence.
He even quotes Linus Torvalds, the creator of Linux, who said, "Intelligence is the ability to avoid doing work, yet getting the work done."
That's such a great quote. It's about working smarter, not harder.
And recognizing that sometimes the most intelligent solution is the one that involves doing less.
Finding that elegant shortcut, that clever hack that gets you to the finish line faster and with less effort.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the big takeaway here? What do we want our listeners to walk away with?
I think the biggest takeaway is that we don't have to be victims of complexity, We have the power to choose simplicity.
And that choice can lead to all sorts of benefits. Greater efficiency, greater effectiveness.
Even greater joy in our work.
I love that. So the next time you're faced with a complex problem, take a deep breath and ask yourself, is there a simpler way?
That one question could change everything.
And remember, you don't have to figure it all out on your own. Talk to your colleagues, brainstorm ideas, and don't be afraid to challenge the status quo.
Sometimes the best solutions come from the most unexpected places.
Well, I think we've thoroughly unpacked the Paperclip mindset. This book has really challenged my thinking.
Me too. It's given me a whole new perspective on how to approach projects and problems.
And we hope it's given you some valuable insights and tools to apply to your own work and life.
Remember, you can find links to the book and other resources in the show notes. Until next time, happy simplifying.